good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Shomler. This is the Desperately Dating Podcast, episode 19. And joining me on my right is my wonderful and wise stepmom, Karyn. How are you doing, Karyn?
I'm doing great, thanks.
I believe today's episode, we hinted at it last time, and we're like, we should just make a topic out of this. This is really interesting. The idea
To
of
us, especially because we both love to travel.
Oh, yeah, it's the idea of vacationing together, going on trips and traveling with your partner and with your spouse.
Yep.
Would you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, as you had mentioned when we were in pre-production, there's a lot of different ways that you travel, right? This could be a huge international trip, or this could be, a weekend stay at your grandma's house.
Yep.
So it could apply to any size trip.
Do we count day trips? Like a
Yeah,
long,
I think
all day at the
so.
beach? I think so too.
I think so, yeah. Because anytime, you kind of go outside of your usual routine, that to me is sort of a trip, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that come up with travel that can be difficult to navigate in a relationship?
I think number one is time. How do you allot your time? How do you spend the time on the trip? Money's another issue that comes up. How is it being spent on? What is it being spent on? And then how do you handle unpredictable things that come into the trip? I mean, I talked in the last episode about the TV show Alone. And so Alone is, if you haven't heard it, it's where you go in the woods with 10 items and you got to survive and live off the land. And whoever survives the longest in the woods with a camera wins the show and gets $500,000. It's a really interesting TV show. But part of what I've learned after watching a couple seasons, the people who win are usually the people who can adapt and pivot when something goes wrong. You go into the trip thinking, I'm going to Vancouver Island, I'm going to fish one way with a hook and a rod, and then your rod breaks, and you got to find a way to catch fish without the tool you have or without the plan you had. Can you shift your plan using maybe a crab trap and catch crab, or can you use a gill net, which is like a net you put on the cross? Can you adjust your approach and make it work another way? And the people who are able to pivot or deal with unpredictable nature, I think have a better time traveling, just period. So those are like the couple things is how do you handle unpredictable moments? Do you have conversations about money? And then how do you allot the time, and do you have the same agreed plan on how this time is going to be spent on the vacation? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and let's dig into those. I have a couple of others, but let's dig into like the time one a little bit more too, because I think there's a lot of different aspects to that. One is how much time are you going to take for this trip? You both have to first agree to that, right?
How long is it going to be?
How long is it going to be? You have to negotiate that. Is it going to be 3 days, or is it going to be 3 months, or whatever, any time in there? Yeah. And then when you're actually on the trip, how are you going to spend that time? What are the priorities for you in using that time? Are your priorities, to hit every new restaurant that's in town, or are your priorities to hike every trail that's available?
Yeah. And it's different with different people. I know when Liz and I travel, we don't care about the food. If I travel with my dad wants to be at all the important food stops. And and I know, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, I know it's a difference between my dad and Liz, is my dad wants to go to the cool dive bar or the cool restaurant. Liz and I are like, we're going to get a dumb sandwich at Fred Meyer and be totally happy. Right.
So that's two things really. It's, time, but also what the interests are, right?
The
so you have a little bit different interests. So how much time are you going to dedicate to each, to keep all the travelers happy, right? And then you talked about the unpredictable nature of traveling. I mean, that's just part of the gig, right? Things go wrong. Things are outside of your control. Trains are delayed, planes are delayed. You get bad directions, cars break down, you get flat tires. I mean, all that stuff can happen. Reservations are lost. So how you roll with that, I think, is going to be a key to how happy you're going to be, together, and how, I guess, how much effort you make to roll with that. A
big one I've noticed since Corona started is that sometimes you go places and it's closed.
Right.
It's happened so many times.
Yeah.
And then your whole plan is ruined, and you're like, well, we're still out in the boonies. How do we adjust our plan and still have a good day? As I talk about this sometimes, is that traveling for me is kind of a litmus test, where for me, traveling is such a big deal. And even if it wasn't, though, I think it's just a good kind of a stress test on how a relationship, whether it's dating or friendship, works. Nathan and I, the other day, on 4th of July, Liz and I were going to the beach. And the day before, my buddy Nathan calls and says, hey, what are you guys doing on the 4th? I'm like, hey, Liz, can Nathan come to the beach? She goes, yeah. So Nathan went to the beach with us. And I hung up the phone from Nathan. I look at Liz and I'm so glad Nathan's coming. He's going to enrich the trip. It's going to be fun. No matter what we do, he's going to go with the flow. He's pleasant. He's fun. There was a moment where I ran way ahead on the beach and I left Liz and Nathan alone, and she was happy. They were good together. Nathan's a great person to have around, and part of why we work so good as friends is because we're the kind of people that can travel well together. And so for me, that's kind of a good test, is whether it's dating or friendship, if you don't travel well together, I've learned, for me personally, that's kind of a red flag or a sign that maybe the relationship or the friendship isn't going to be that fruitful either.
Could be. Yeah, it definitely could be. There's some other things that you brought up in there about money. That's another big one. Agreeing on how much you want to spend for the different parts of your vacation. So some people might be totally thrilled to camp out, and save a lot of money and really enjoy that experience. And then other people might prefer to spend more money and have a hotel. You know? And do you agree on that?
And what do you value?
Yeah, what do you value? What kind of experience do you want to have, and what's it going to cost? And same with how you brought up with the difference with your dad, where you guys would be happy grabbing a sandwich from the deli, and he would just love to go and have a fancy meal.
Yeah.
So that's also how you spend your money too.
Well, also another thing is gift shops, right? Like,
yeah.
Do you have? Are you available? One person might be like, I want to spend $100 on this trip and get a cool gift or a cool thing to remember, that, like a token to remember the trip by. Another person's like, what is that useless nonsense? And I didn't plan to spend this money, and I'm not comfortable spending, whatever. Like, there can be other, besides travel expenses, there can also be little frivolous things you spend money on that one person likes and the other person is very uncomfortable with.
Right. Or when unexpected things come up and you end up having to spend money on that too, Yeah. You get lost somewhere really far away, your car breaks down and you end up having to take a taxi that you weren't planning on or something, or your airport shuttle falls through and you have to find different means.
Yeah, that unexpected nature of travel, I think, again, you learn how someone operates in crisis or in a tough moment because it does translate to your everyday life where you're driving. Like one time we're driving to your house and Liz hadn't been there yet. She was driving, and I gave her the wrong direction. We took a wrong turn, and we were late, and it was like not a big deal. She's like, it's fine. I feel bad that we're late, but there was no panic and anger there.
Right.
And part of it, I knew that was going to work because we'd already been on vacations together, and when something had arisen that we weren't prepared for, the pizza place we wanted to go to was closed. We just pivoted and went to get Chinese instead. It was okay.
Right.
It wasn't the end of the world.
Right. But if instead, in that scenario, she had reacted with anger or hurt or tears or whatever.
Cries or gets flustered or frustrated.
Yeah. Then that would have changed your whole experience of the adventure.
Yeah.
But I would also put it out there, too, that sometimes it's exactly those times when things don't work out the way you thought, your first plan falls through, that plan B actually ends up being way better. I know.
Is there an example of that you can think of?
I can think of all kinds of examples of that. But one would be like, having my heart set on going to a particular restaurant and it's closed or whatever, can't get in, and then going to some other little joint just on a whim, and it turns out to be great, a wonderful experience.
I got one, too. When I started doing podcasts, I did a video game podcast. And I thought I was going to be a video game podcaster. That was my goal, my thought. Turns out I'm a sports podcaster, right?
Yeah.
I've made all my money and had all my success talking about sports. And so sometimes that you head out in one direction and a door gets closed, but because you're already headed in a direction, you just keep following the path and find a different plan C instead of plan B. And it works pretty great.
Right. Yeah, but you have to be open-minded about that. So it definitely helps if both partners are kind of, that's how they deal with the world. And then another thing you had said, let me see here.
Well, you said that I mentioned money, time, and, the unpredictable nature. You said there's other stuff, other factors.
Oh, yeah. So another thing that I wanted to bring up was that it's also kind of a test in that it's a lot of togetherness.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in a tent together or in a hotel room or whatever together on a long airplane ride, you got to be able to manage that, too.
When you're tested. When my dad, Liz, and I went to Montana, I was short with my dad a couple days. There was a couple moments at the end of the trip that I felt bad about, and I apologized pretty quickly for, where I got short with my dad because I've been living in close proximity to my dad. We're like sharing a tiny little space for like days and days and days, and we're driving together, and it is a lot of time together. And those little things that might be at first, like he takes a fuck bazillion of pictures. So many. And at first I was like, okay, it's cute, it's this thing. And by the end of the trip, I'm like, dude, it's the same picture of a stupid pond which you already have, and you have a better picture of him. And I realized I had to just kind of say, I'm getting mad at my dad for doing what he does already, right? And the little thing can boil over. A great example is we have a kitten, and the kitten will play with shit. He's going to attack bags. He's going to play with your feet. He's going to stand in front of the TV. And you can't get mad at a kitten for doing kitten things.
Right.
And if I go on a trip with artists, my dad and Liz, who want to take a bazillion pictures, I can't get mad at them for doing that.
Right.
But I had to have that moment of realization, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it totally does. And you bring up, I think there's two thoughts in there that I would add. And that's, one, it's about learning how to kind of give each other a little bit of space at times too. And so first off, you have to understand that that's a need that you have. And then you need to work out with your traveling companions how you're gonna honor that. So, for instance, a lot of times when your dad and I travel together, I usually wake up before he does, and so I have a little time by myself then. So, and then there may be times later in the afternoon where he'll go and grab a cup of coffee in the coffee shop and just give me a little time, or I might head out and just go for a walk by myself for a little while so that he can wake up and have coffee by himself or whatever.
So you could be on a vacation together. You're away in France together,
right?
But you still have moments apart, and that's okay.
It is, and because we both recognize that that's necessary for us, and sometimes he would stay up late at night, just so that he could have time alone, and then I'd get up early in the morning so that I'd have time alone. So you need to recognize that in yourself, that that's something you need, and then have a partner that you communicate that with and problem solve about how that's going to work.
It was so great. There was a day in Montana where my dad got up early. He went to a bakery to take pictures and hang out, and we're like, yeah, we don't really want to go. And Liz and I stayed in the Airbnb. We played Nintendo Switch together, and we just had a grand old time, and it was nice. He got to do what he wanted to do. He really wanted to go to this bakery. We didn't give a fuck about the bakery. He didn't force us to go. Wasn't mad at us for not wanting to go. We did separate things, even though we were together on this trip. And I guess that's the hard and maybe the important part is being able to communicate, and also not like that understanding of I don't need to do every single thing with every single person on every single moment of every trip.
That's a really good point. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I know I have traveled with other families where that's kind of what the expectation is. That we're on this trip together, so we're going to be doing every single thing together.
That's not even a realistic expectation.
Well, it's not, but I think a lot of people have that.
Yeah.
They want to spend every minute together, do everything together. And I don't think it's healthy. That's not what I want out of a vacation is probably a better way for me to say that. But there are plenty of people out there. So that's something that you should figure out ahead of time. The other is, I think, how, we're on time a lot, but how you want to structure your time on your trip. Like how much downtime do you need? How much go time and how much downtime? And that's important too. And that can be really different between people. I know I love vacationing with my brother and his daughter, but he's the type where he wants to be going the entire day and then really just, hang out at the hotel to sleep. And that's it. I'm different. What I like instead is to do half a day, usually in the morning, go and do stuff and then have the afternoon just to relax and maybe enjoy the resort and read or do just what comes up, not have planned time. Whereas he wants a plan the whole time. And filled the whole time.
How does it change when you throw kids into the equation?
Oh, boy.
Because kids don't always want to do what the adults want to do.
Right.
And that has to be something that's talked about. Because then you go back. What made me think about this was when you said there's an expectation sometimes that everybody's doing the same thing together the whole time. And even if that is what happens, it doesn't mean it's what's good for everybody. And it doesn't, like you go on vacation. I go on vacation because I want to have a good time. It's it's a break from my job. It's a break from my bills, my other thoughts.
Yeah.
It's for me to have some time to enjoy. And man, if I'm an adult and I have kids that are 14 and 15 and I want to go to this really fancy dinner and the kids are like, we don't give a fuck. We just want to sleep or whatever. Let the kids do what they enjoy. I think there is a moment where you want to push kids. Like we were even talking about how early in our production meeting, Liz and I have very similar interests where for the most part on a vacation, we want to do all the same stuff. One of the things that I think is interesting, if we ever go to she might want to go to a Broadway play someday. I would never in a million years intentionally go to a Broadway play. It's just not even that I hate it. It's just not on my radar.
Right.
But I'm sure if I went, it'd be a different experience I would never think I would have. And oh my gosh, it's cool. And so those differences aren't always bad. It sometimes can give you experiences you never have on your own.
Right. It can enrich the whole thing for you. So you need to be open to some extent. But I think what you're trying to say is you want to be open to some of that, but you don't want to force people to do things that they really just don't want to do.
Yeah.
Or make it all
tired.
one way or the other.
How often are if you do stuff all day and you're just tired, sometimes let people. It's 8 o'clock. You've been looking at tourist stuff all day. Someone wants to go to dinner. Someone wants to go to bed. Let the person go to bed.
Yeah, I agree.
My dad, we were in Montana. My dad went to drinks with Corey, who owns Italian Blacksmith. This incredible. Have you ever been there? I don't think you have.
No, I haven't.
Best fucking restaurant in Bozeman, Montana. It's amazing.
That's what I hear.
Corey and my dad and Steve, which is Corey's dad, the owner of the restaurant, all went together for drinks at night. And me and Liz were like, look, we're tired. We went on a long hike today, had a long day. And my dad was like, oh, no problem. Let us go to bed. They went to drinks without us, and it was totally fine.
Right. Right. So even though you may have gotten something out of that experience, honoring yourself and that you knew that you're just tuckered out.
Yeah, I felt bad.
Okay.
I was going to miss out on a cool opportunity with this incredible chef and getting to talk to this guy but I was like, look, I know my limit, and I'm just too tired to do this.
Right. And I think that your dad is such, and you have a relationship that's such that if it was really important to him for some reason, he would let you know, and you probably would have done it.
Yeah, if he said he's like, no, let me tell you, I think this is something you shouldn't miss out on.
Yeah, you shouldn't miss. Right?
And I trust him in those moments.
Yeah.
But he also wouldn't force me. He'd give me the choice regardless.
No, because he understands that need too, that need for downtime and rest, and that it's important to recognize that in yourself.
When you had kids, how did you, even like little kids, how did you travel? Is that something that goes away for a while?
It didn't for me because it's always been a priority for me. I've always loved it. And I also feel like for kids, it's a wonderful education.
Oh, yeah.
You teach kids so many things when you take them to different places, different, cities, different states, different countries, stuff that you just can't really learn at home. And a lot of it actually is how to be flexible, how to pivot, as you say, how to recover and still have a good time if things don't work out the right way the first time. And then too, just seeing firsthand how different people live their lives, and that, there's to recognize that there's a lot of different ways to be happy and successful and live. And I think that's something that you get when you travel. And so I definitely wanted to expose kids to that early on. And luckily the kid's dad feels that way too.
I think Elizabeth would say the same thing. She talks about her childhood was kind of rough, but she talks about some of the best moments where she was fortunate enough to go on a lot of vacations with her family, and said she learned a lot about people skills and about life and about how people work and about the world. And there are so many things you pick up when you go to other places, because our American culture is not the same culture you see in other places. It's
very
it's
different.
vastly different, and you get a different, more enriched worldview.
Yep.
As cliche and silly as it sounds, it's true.
It is true.
There's
it's
a
really
lot of stuff.
true. Yeah.
Like, it's really fun when her and I talk. I've never been to another country, which is kind of crazy. I mean, I think I'm pretty well versed, and I know a lot of crap about America, and I'm very. I think pretty. I like to think I'm wise in a lot of respects.
But you've also visited a lot of different parts of America.
Yeah, and which is sometimes like, I mean, you look at Europe. What's different? Cincinnati is a completely different country distance wise. Or like the South has a different dialect, or New York talks completely different. So you're right a little bit. But it's interesting how there'll be a moment where I'm sitting here not understanding something, and Liz goes, well, that's because in France, this is how it's done, or in Spain or whatever. And she understands because she's been to those places some of the things I don't get. So we really complement each other well, where I understand something she doesn't. She really can help me understand things I don't because she's been there and has a more deeper grasp on those cultures.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's great for kids to get that firsthand if possible. I'd say, to get back to your question, which is, how does that change travel? Well, when kids are little, you have to be aware of their basic needs, because travel, sometimes schedules get weird, and, you can be on long flights or whatever, long car rides, to make sure that you're not trying to cram in too much for kids. They just don't have the same tolerance. They're pretty routine bound if you think about it. Most kids, I would say, that when they're real little. I
see kind of a selfishness. You see a lot of times people go to like Disneyland, for example, and they take their little 5-year-old for the whole day and the kids tuckered out. And if you have a 4-day trip, if you take them all day for the longest day of their lives, day one, they're not going to make it to day 2, 3, and 4. But if you go like a half day a little bit, slow down, let them play in the pool in the afternoon on day one.
Exactly.
It spreads it out a little better.
Yeah, and to balance the really kid-friendly things with their age and their interests, I think is a good way to go. And then also to attend to their needs, like for eating and sleeping.
Do you think
running around?
Well, the same way that a parent might want to go either with good intentions or because they're selfish, might have a plan. We're going to do this. And they get in the moment and they realize, look, my kid's tired and we were going to go see Space Mountain today, but it's just not going to happen today. Is there a correlation between the way you interact with your kids on vacation and your spouse?
I think so. And the other bit to that is if you're vacationing with your partner and your kids, you're setting the example. You're teaching kids how to manage, how to be resilient, or you have the opportunity to anyway.
Yeah.
So when you're confronted with things not going the way that you want or with some of the other challenges of travel,
They're watching.
They're watching. So you can teach them how to be a good traveler, which, I think makes people better human beings, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't overstate how I feel about it.
Yeah, if you get flustered and angry and the 5-year-old sees you fall apart completely when the restaurant's closed that you were planning to go to.
Yep.
Ding, ding, ding. That whether they know it or not, they're learning behavior of how to handle certain situations.
Frustration, right?
Yeah.
and unpredictability. So, and then the other, when kids get a little bit older, when they're teens and stuff, you have to adjust again in a different way to allow them some, I would say, safe time where they can be independent. So what I found is kind of a good way is when you can be like maybe in a nice resort where there's unlimited dining because they eat like there's no tomorrow, so that they can just go and eat whenever they want, and that there's enough for them to do that they can go and be independent and be by themselves and be with kids their own age and not feel like they have to be stuck with their parents the whole time. But balance it with the parents feeling safe that they're in a place that they can do that.
Yeah.
And then planning downtime too for teenagers so that they can just go and kind of absorb the cultural scene. Like we were in Paris. I would have loved to have gone to the Louvre, the big old museum. Yeah. But I knew that was not teenager friendly. They didn't care.
Yeah. They don't want to see.
I'm not going to put them through that.
No.
That's ridiculous. So we went, and then the kids were allowed to stay in a sidewalk cafe and just like soak up the world going by, on Paris street corner. And they were thrilled and we were thrilled and it all worked out.
That's cool. I think it's interesting how, I don't know how to put this properly, but when you allow for, like when we travel, Liz and I, what we do is we'll pick like, hey, they're like, we're going to the, this part of the coast and there's like 3 things in this area we want to see. And we'll make sure we hit all 3. But then the rest of the time, we kind of just let it go with the flow. And we have some days that are very planned and scheduled. Some days are like, we're hitting these 3 stops and that's it. Sometimes we wake up and we go, okay, we have the whole day. Let's just see where the day takes. And sometimes that means you're going through a bunch of shops and doing whatever. And sometimes it means you're at the same place for 8 hours looking at the sun or looking at some water or starfish or whatever. And so I've just come to learn like flexibility, both to plan and then also have days where you don't plan. And then when you don't plan, let those days just take you where you go. And some of my best moments on every trip I've been on was a moment, the other day on 4th of July, Liz and I are driving in our car down the freeway, down Highway 101. And we see this gigantic house up on the hill. And we're like, that house has to have a really sick view. And we're like, well, can we try to find that house? And we turn off to try to find the house. We didn't find the house at all. But it led us down this really cool road, 1-lane road where it's like dirt road and potholes and over this stuff. And we found a nature preserve up on the weirdest hill on the coast with this incredible, beautiful view. And if we hadn't had the thought to say, we're headed in this beach, why not take a little detour? We took the detour, went off this crazy, weird path and found this beautiful thing we would have never seen otherwise. And so that ability to say, you know what, we have a plan, but let's take a detour here or there and see so many other cool stuff. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. The power of spontaneity, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add? Should we go back a little bit to the original topic maybe? Or I don't know. I'm happy either way.
You had made a comment at some point that that maybe it's a red flag if you can't travel well together. I don't know. I don't know about that. I think it just sort of depends on how important it is to you to travel and share that with your partner.
Yeah.
And for me, it is. So I'm grateful that,
for me too,
I have a partner that is interested in that and that we do travel well together. But I don't know if that's true for everyone. I mean, I there's some friends of your dad's where the wife travels a lot and the husband stays home, and they seem reasonably happy that way. So maybe it can work.
Well, I would have that one question. I think you're probably right. I mean, like, we got to remember that our worldview is not necessarily the same view that everyone else in the world has, right? Like, you and I and our both of our spouses greatly value travel. So, of course, we would see traveling as a necessary thing where if the person we're with couldn't travel with us, huge red flag. And
we couldn't figure out how to travel well together.
And it's a deal breaker for me. If I can't travel with my partner, it's a deal breaker for me personally. But I would say, okay, if someone doesn't value traveling and it's not a deal breaker for them, I would still wonder, though, how's the day trip to grandma's?
Yeah.
If that's
That's
awful,
true.
that's awful,
That's
that's a deal
true.
breaker also, right? Like,
Right.
So if you can't handle driving 3 hours to grandma's house for the day, and there's arguing and fighting and bitterness, isn't that still a red flag? Because I would think this is just a what if of a what if of a what if, right? But if that happens, and if this happens, and if that happens, then does that mean you can't handle flexibility, or you can't handle, like, your partner really wants you to meet the grandma and you don't want to, and you're bitter and mean about it? Whatever it is, there's some underlying issue. If you can't go on a day trip with your partner, that's weird, right?
Well, maybe, but I guess I'm just trying to keep an open mind.
For sure.
And you know what? I just thought of another couple that I know, and this was some dear friends that were neighbors when I was growing up, and the husband was kind of a curmudgeon, and I say that in the kindest way. He liked his routines. He was very much a homebody. Didn't ever really want to go anywhere. But his wife really did. Like, she liked to go back to Ohio to visit her sisters and, take different trips around. And so they got along in other ways, but that was just one thing they didn't share. And it didn't seem like it was a deal breaker for them. Yeah. And it didn't seem like it was a sign of deeper issues. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like they just accepted that that's how he is. He's kind of rigid. He likes his home-based routine, and that's okay. Yeah,
I think I want to be clear too. I'm not saying like I'm not trying to make a hard rule. Like, if you don't travel with your partner, it's bad. That's not my goal. I think I'm trying to leave every stone unturned. Where just because some people, I think, don't travel with their partner well, and that's totally fine. But I'm sure some of them have an issue they don't even know about. I'm sure that both are possible.
So you're saying, I think if I hear you right, what you're saying is that it could be a sign of maybe a deeper issue, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Perfect.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Nope. I would agree, but for me, it's definitely a great thing.
Well, we care about it. It's important to us. Clearly, we just talked for 27 minutes about traveling.
I know. That was easy, right?
That's all I have. Do you have anything else?
Can't think of it.
No, guys, thank you so much. Hope you have a great day. My name is Zach Shomler. That is my wonderful and wise stepmom, Karyn.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Ba-dum-bum-bam. We are done.